Hello and very warm welcome at Amish Shackle 5858. I am Amish Shackle. Following news have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian news channels and the news agencies. So please, let's go to the headlines.
Tonight, President Trump's first-hand look at the catastrophic flooding in Texas. The President and First Lady Melania Trump on the ground in Kerr County.
I've gone to a lot of hurricanes, a lot of tornadoes. I've never seen anything like this.
The President meeting with families and local officials. He was later pressed about reports of warnings that didn't go out in time and lives that could have been saved. At least 120 people dead, more than 160 still missing. 1 week of around-the-clock searches. A rescue team combing through a huge pile of debris, looking for a family of 3, possibly buried underneath. Also tonight, dangerous heat and dry conditions igniting a large wildfire near the Grand Canyon. Residents and visitors forced to evacuate. Severe storms from Colorado to Michigan at this hour. A tornado watch across multiple states. Tonight, after an ice raid turned violent, the FBI is now offering a $50,000 reward for information on a suspect authorities say fired a gun at federal agents. Major turmoil inside the Justice Department over the handling of the files in the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. Sources tell ABC News a fiery confrontation erupted between Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino. Those sources say Bongino did not come to work today, telling allies he's considering resigning. The emotional scene at the State Department just a short time ago. The Trump administration laying off more than 1,300 employees. ABC News obtaining an email informing some workers they received layoff notices by mistake. Late today, the Air India crash report released to the public. 260 people killed seconds after takeoff. What the report shows about the fuel cutoff switches. Tonight, passengers are speaking out after an emergency forced their Delta flight from Madrid to New York to land on a small island in the middle of the Atlantic. The passengers stuck there for roughly 30 hours. The remarkable survival story of a 75-year-old woman suffering a broken femur after a crash, crawling for 14 hours inch by inch until she made it home. And America Strong tonight, 1 week after the devastating floods in central Texas. Volunteers saving the lives of hundreds of shelter animals, flying them to safety, and bringing in much-needed supplies.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David York.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on this busy Friday.
Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson is facing backlash for her blistering dissent. So she wrote more dissenting opinions than any other justice this past term, and some critics say she's trying to play an outsized role on the nation's highest court. The New York Times reports Jackson was recently asked about what keeps her up at night, and she responded, I would say the state of our democracy. James Freeman is a Fox News contributor and co-host of Bottom Line on Fox Business Today, and Danielle Alvarez, she's RNC senior advisor. Good to have you both. I just want to play for you this little bit from ABC, Call for 3. This is at the Essence Festival on how she feels she's doing.
I'm aware that people are watching. They want to know how I'm going to perform in this job and in this environment, and so I'm doing my best work, as well as I can do, because I want people to see and know that I can do anything just like anyone else.
Danielle, Jackson basically is called for one. She wrote 24 opinions and more dissents than any other justice in the term that just ended. And she was in the majority of 72%. Now that sounds like a lot, except for that is the lowest number on the court.
I mean, we just heard her comment about her performance. If she wants to perform, she should go back to Broadway. It is dangerous for her to try to politicize the bench, and she was smacked down by her liberal colleague, Justice Sotomayor. She was smacked down, who said the president's executive order, was written to apply to the law, to reorg and focus on the application of the law. So I really think she's, out of her skis here. She really needs to focus on doing her job and not trying to be an influencer and talk about her emotions. She's there to interpret the law.
Okay, on that point, James, she said this the other day. I will say, forgive me, Justice Sotomayor, but I need to write on this case, and it's because I feel like I might have something to offer and something to add, and I'm not afraid to use my voice. That kind of goes with the clip that Dana just referred to from on ABC last week. Yeah, I think that clip kind of explains the whole problem, which is she's playing to an audience beyond the court. She's not so much making legal arguments as crafting sound bites for the New York Times or MSNBC. And then she actually quotes the New York Times recently as if it's some legal authority trying to smear the court, saying it's siding with moneyed interest, and admit she had no evidence for that. The fact that she should be apologizing to Sotomayor and all the other justices, and you notice they're not joining her. She does these lone dissents. The other liberals don't want to be associated with her because they're not really legal arguments. She said it was an existential threat to the rule of law to get rid of universal injunctions. Nowhere in the Constitution, didn't even exist for the first 200 years of our history, but this is sort of the soundbite era.
Well, she wrote a dissent in this case about the nationwide injunctions, and
on this Friday night, the U.S. president's latest threat to hit Canada with more hefty tariffs.
we're in solution mode.
What it means for trade talks and what Trump might be actually trying to achieve. Wildfires and evacuations across Western Canada. The American politicians complaining about the drifting smoke and how Manitoba's premier fired back. Brutal reality. The stark decisions facing malnourished Palestinians in Gaza.
They have a choice between being shot or being fed. This is unacceptable, and it's continuing.
As Europe secures a deal with Israel to provide more aid, plus changing of the guard. The Canadian Military Regiment granted a rare royal honor, a ceremony and message of solidarity.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Jeff Simple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. U.S. President Donald Trump is throwing yet another curveball into trade talks between the U.S. and Canada, now threatening 35% tariffs on Canadian imports starting August 1st. The White House is now clarifying that those tariffs would only apply to goods not covered by CUSMA. That's the current free trade agreement. Those goods are already facing tariffs of 25%. This new threat comes just days before Canadian officials had hoped to secure a new trade deal. Jackson Prosco has tonight's top story from Washington.
The Prime Minister's hopes for reaching a trade deal by July 21st seemed shaky after President Donald Trump sent a late-night letter to Mark Carney announcing a 35% tariff on Canada beginning August 1st.
It was sent yesterday. They called. I think it was fairly well received. What we need.
Trump says the new tariffs are separate from those already in place on steel, aluminum, energy, and potash. The White House tells Global News the tariffs won't apply to goods covered under the existing U.S.-Canada-Mexico trade agreement. In addition to fentanyl, Trump cited supply management in Canada's dairy industry as an ongoing issue solved. August revised after Trump's
we're trying to make sure that ultimately will be
as the Trump letter constitutes anything close to a final deal. It may down to what else Canada is willing to negotiate.
The administration is transactional. So you've got to think about gauging ways where you don't surrender key Canadian interests in return for a promise that may not be held.
The fine print makes that clear. In his letter, Trump mentions these tariffs may be modified upward or downward depending on our relationship with your country.
You're not getting to a new plateau of trade relationships by injecting more uncertainty. We are now all experiencing and witnessing to how Mr. Trump thinks.
Trump's letter has ignited enough concern in Ottawa that the PM has scheduled both a cabinet meeting and a first minister's meeting in the next 2 weeks, all with the understanding that, as always, Trump's plans are firm until they're not. Jeff?
All right, Jackson Prosco in Washington. Thanks, Jackson. The U.S. and Europe are embroiled in their own trade negotiations, and the European Commission has now dropped its plan to levy a tax on digital companies, including U.S. tech giants Apple and Meta, similar to the digital services tax the Canadian government dropped last month. Like Canada, the European bloc is hoping that shelving the levy on big tech will help appease President Trump and achieve a more favorable trade deal. Canada's Minister of Energy and Natural Resources says industry leaders are working to soften the blow from Trump's tariffs. Tim Hodgson just wrapped up 3 days of meetings at the Energy and Mines Ministers Conference, and he says federal, provincial, and territorial leaders are working to secure Canada's place as an energy and resource superpower.
Canada has many important cards in these negotiations, and many of those cards, the most important ones, are energy and natural resources. At the G7, it was abundantly clear Canada has the energy and minerals the world wants.
Hodgson also announced nearly $16 million for clean energy projects in the Maritimes. That money will fund 6 renewable energy projects.
Can the Prime Minister bullshit the border on site?
MPP are heading out to their summer recess, but plans are reportedly afoot for a cabinet reshuffle following a torrid year for the Prime Minister.
The front bench out to get Starmer's premiership back on track after weeks of setbacks and controversies.
Of course, it comes as Angela Rayner's, if you like, mint bite recent trips in Birmingham, and the union also announced that it's going to review its relationship with the Labour Party. We'll be speaking actually a bit later on to the General Secretary of Unite, Jack Graham, a bit later on.
A report into the Air India crash that killed 260 people has found that switches to the engine's fuel supplies were turned off seconds after taking a look throughout the show.
Yes, Oasis came home to Manchester. The band played their first gig there for nearly 16 years last night after kicking off their world tour last night.
Celebrations and distraction to sports events like Wimbledon. We were debating just that. And talk to turns.
I'll see that. The author of the best-selling book The Salt Path has been accused of lying, as Urban claims the book and the movie are very misleading and spun, this is a quote, spun from lies, deceit and desperation.
It was at the peak this weekend, temperatures reaching 34 degrees, it's predicted.
Djokovic after his a record equally Wimbledon title on the
Blue skies and rising temperatures, high UV levels today as well. Join me later for a full forecast to find how high the temperatures could go and how long this heat wave will last.
It's a Saturday morning and just for a change, mate, even knows.
It is. And just to keep the same, I'm Anne Diamond. This is TV News Breakfast on a Saturday.
Line News, this a prelim report on the Fair India crash in Ahmedabad reveals that the engines cut off moments after takeoff, shutting them down. Investigators say there's no evidence to show blame to the Boeing aircraft or GE engines powering it. Ukraine says the U.S. has carried aged after oddly pausing last week. Armaments could Patriot defense missile like Kyiv needs in its war with Ukraine. Southeast Asia's top diplomats have wrapped up talks in Kuala Lumpur. The 15th Ministry unity, the importance of rules-based trade to take on rising geoeconomic tensions. And the top diplomats of the U.S. and China have met in person for the first time. Garuda Wang Yi sat down on the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting. The hour-long talks were described as positive and constructive by both sides. And that is the latest from the C Newsroom. It's coming up today. Initial indications show the fuel to the engines of the Air India plane that crashed, killing 260 people, was cut off moments after takeoff.
And Crystal Palace chairman Steve Parish said the motion from the league is one of the great injustices in the history of European football.
It's Saturday, the 12th of July. Investigators say switch
Month later made the call and a crash that killed 260 people.
A care worker faces possible destitution and deportation after reporting alleged abuse. Temperatures in the UK reach higher than 34 degrees today in the 30th heatwave year.
And in sport, Liverpool are to retire the number 20 in honour of Diogo Jota, who tragically died in a car crash earlier.
Hello, very good morning. Thanks for joining us here today. The report.
ABC here.
It was ill after seeing against odds in hostile outback rain. 11 days out there. So I'm sure my track. A preliminary report into the fatal Air India crash reveals the plane's fuel switches were flipped off second after takeoff. Traditional custodians celebrate after ancient Aboriginal rock art in Western Australia is granted World Heritage status. And Australian sensation Gout does it again, sprinting to a stunning diamond debut. Hello, welcome to ABC News. I'm Lorna Dunkley. German backpacker Carol raids Australia's remote field. Scarendal reports from Perth's Fiona Stanley Hospital.
We've got an incredible amount of detail as to exactly what happened. She went through at Nature Reserve. Now, initially it was thought that Carolina was out there for around 12 days and that she had her van there with her. The idea was that she, with her van, where her resources were, she had plenty of water. We know she stopped and filled up jerry cans with water. We have CCTV vision of her at convenience stores along the way to that spot. The van broke down. But incredibly, I think police have revealed that she actually only spent one night with her van when it broke down, and she spent the remaining 11 nights trekking through dense bushland. The police officers claimed that there was zero.
Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak. You're on Fred. And full switch. Carve added, you know, the on the We begin with that report on last month's Air India crash, which found that the plane's engine control switches were moved to the cutoff position just moments before impact. To prop engines of fuel nearly simultaneously. The preliminary report issued by India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau also found that pilots were confused over how the switch got flipped. The plane, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, crashed shortly after takeoff in Ahmedabad, exactly.
This is DW News, and these are our top stories. US President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump have visited Texas to see recovery efforts from last weekend's deadly flash. Trump defended the state authorities' response to the disaster, which some critics have said was inadequate. At least 120 people died in the fire. A preliminary report into last month's Air India crash found fuel to the plane's engines appears to have been cut off shortly after takeoff. 260 people and the above the craft involved was a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner and was 11 years old at the time of the crash. The Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, has begun the process of ending its armed struggle against Turkey. The militants held a ceremony in northern Iraq, thousands of PKK fighters symbolically burning their weapons. The PKK is designated a terrorist organization by Turkey, EU and the US. This is DW News from Berlin. There's more news on our website, dw.com.
This week on Arts Unveiled. And now, German jazz pianist Olivia Thoma in her album Like Water with the help of legendary producer Russ Titelman. We also hear one of the earliest ever electronic
news.
President Trump away of prize nominees from leaders who praises recent diplomatic efforts at the White House. He's really proud of Trump.
Support. Mr. President, the letter I sent to the Nobel Prize Committee is nominating you for the Peace, which is well deserved. Thank you, Thank you very much.
Just days later, leader of that summit, Gabonese president hailed Joshua in mediated peace between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, 2 years of the conflict.
And he he's back in the SIAC region. That is my region, the region where DRC signed a deal, and so now bringing. I'm not sure where that was not possible. So I think that he does deserve a Nobel Peace Prize. That is my opinion on this.
Not all are convinced. The Associated Press noted that peace remains elusive in key conflicts like Russia, Ukraine, and Israel.
In June, Trump eased tensions between Pakistan, but Pakistan nominated Trump for the Peace Prize. It then turned around and condemned him for bombing Iran's nuclear sites. Despite the praise we've been hearing recently, peace continues to elude Trump in some conflicts, including the wars between Israel and Hamas and Russia and Ukraine.
While the Nobel Prize presidential nominations from national leaders allowed, has become a company, and Gazans are now paying the steep price just to keep it circulating. With banks shuttered, ATMs out of service, and border crossings closed, fiscal cash is nearly impossible to come by. Most bills to survive, and those notes are now being patched up by hand. To repair men multiple times just to keep their money usable. That crisis, worsened by Israeli restrictions and Gaza financial collapse, has become yet another layer of hardship for civilians already. 3 times later, repair one transparency so that we can use it in the market, and the sellers and owners of the stores accept it. Yet not everyone does. Jihadi al-Sosi, also from Gaza, says even intact notes are now rejected. They object to it. But the problem is, they used to object to 10 shekels and some now use 20 shekels and 50 shekels. With inflation soaring, unemployment estimated above 80%, and money changes charged of connection with the African Uzab.
Tonight, the major clue just revealed in that Air India disaster, what the pilots said to each other just before they lost control. The new report just in on that crash that ended in a massive fireball, killing hundreds on board. Photos of the burned out controls, some of those switches in the wrong position immediately after takeoff, and why investigators are looking into whether one of the pilots intentionally cut off fuel to the engines. Also breaking tonight, the Jeffrey Epstein files dividing the top levels of the Justice Department. The official and Trump ally threatening to leave the bureau after officials didn't release more files. President Trump in Texas 1 week after those deadly floods to homes and families, saying he's never seen anything like it. It comes as wildfire season takes off, the giant plumes of smoke at the Grand Canyon forcing evacuations, the lightning strike that set off the inferno, the incredible new deal that made the devil of his he used Sharpie to make his prison clothing look like a law enforcement uniform. Plus, what was inside that car that helped him on the run? Our Dateline exclusive, the Daily Trial insiders, speaking out for the first time. What his longtime personal assistant tells us she witnessed firsthand. The skyscraper-sized icebergs adrift and heading towards a small town. And the surprise is the elder dropping money and rose petals to fulfill one man's last wish. Nightly News starts right now. This is NBC Nightly News with Thomas. And tonight, as we come on the air, we have news on that.
The president surveys the Texas flood damage, comforts survivors, and thanks first responders. They've done an unbelievable job. But it's taking a heavy toll.
Doing it every day and not getting a break.
As the search for the missing enters a second week.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News.
Good evening, I'm Maurice Dubois. John is off tonight. President Trump went to Central Texas today to see for himself the devastation from the floods that tore through Hill Country 1 week ago. 121 people are confirmed dead. That number is expected to rise, though, with at least 169 still listed as missing. Texas Governor Greg Abbott vowed to keep up the search until everyone is found. But as the search enters a second week, it is taking a heavy toll, physical and mental. Jason Allen has been covering the story from the start.
President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump met today with rescue workers, survivors, and family members who lost loved ones in Kerrville, Texas, telling them his administration is here to help.
We just visited with incredible families that, look, they've been devastated. They lost their child or 2 children.
Today, Governor Greg Abbott visited a memorial for the victims. He told us Texas lawmakers will meet soon to plan local disaster warning system.
We are going to put together in a session beginning in 10 days the abilities to ensure better preparation, better alerts, so that people will not surprise as they went this time.
More than 120 people.
I'm Amna Nabaz. Jeff Bennett is away. On the News Hour tonight, as President Trump tours the flood dam in Texas, we take a look at a home for disabled youth, piecing together what's left after devastating loss.
People talk about, well, we want to give them closure. There is no closure. You lose that loved one, you learn to live with the pain of that loss.
How the toy industry is feeling in turn spent fighting for industry. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In Gaza, the UN Human Rights Office said it called Humanitarian Foundation, GHF. The GHF announced troops say over 2 million mostly crammed into this little area. Includes 8 children who gathered outside the Abdiata clinic where they were waiting to receive nutritional supplements. The young children lying on the street as they scrambled the wound.
Women onto the ground. They were waiting for the place to open so they could receive nutritional supplements. You know that the crossings are closed and there's no food or drink. People are forced to wait here in order to get nutritional supplements for their children.
Hi and very warm welcome at Amish Shackle 5858. I am Amish Shackle. Following news headlines have been reported by world major English news channels and news agencies. So please watch it.